Hey guys, this is the help video for homework number 7, and there's 2 different topics this week, which I'm going to interact with this one problem, but I'm going to do both things to it, like I'm going to interact with it the same way that both topics would ask you to. So 2q squared minus 7q minus 7 equals 0. And so then if I go through and I figure out what a, b, and c are, then I can say that a equals positive 2, b equals negative 7, and c also equals negative 7. All right, so 2 different ways to handle this situation. There's two different things I'm asking you to be able to do this week. One of them is to solve for x. So if, and in this case, it's q, right? So we're talking about q in this problem, I guess. But we're going to solve for that input variable, basically. And that is topic WGU. So that's where we're going through the entire big formula, the quadratic formula. That's the one with that had the story. So that negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And whatever that equals, when I add and then subtract what I get from all of that, when I PEMDAS it all out, that equals, in this case, I guess I should put the q on this one. Let's erase it and put the real letter is going to equal q. And there's going to be 2, usually 2, but not always. The other thing I can do is find the discriminant, which I will tell you, this doesn't really help very much in real life. In real life, this is not the most important information. It does give us information about how many solutions. So it tells us, the discriminant tells us how many solutions does this have. I don't necessarily think in the scheme of math, this is the most important thing that you're doing with quadratic equations. But in the scheme of where you are in math and algebra, there's really two different things that can happen that make sense. And there's one thing that can happen that doesn't make sense. Either you're going to get a discriminant that is greater than 0 or a discriminant that equals 0. So these are what I would consider like a normal situation for you guys. The other part of it, though, is that if d is less than 0, if you end up taking the square root of a negative number, basically, then this is imaginary. So this is not normal for what you guys know how to do. So I'm going to put here that normal means real. This is part of the real number system. I think the real reason we talk about the discriminant is just to prepare you for the fact that eventually you're going to have this to deal with. Eventually, you're going to have this imaginary number. So they're not asking you to know anything about that other than it's possible to get the type of solution that you can't solve yet, and they want you to recognize when that happens. So I really do think that's basically about the benefit of it all. The nice part about the discriminant, though, is that the discriminant is really just a piece of that bigger part that I wrote over here. So the discriminant is just this piece that's underneath the radical, because really what you're trying to see is, am I taking the square root of a positive number, like d is greater than 0? Am I taking the square root of 0? Or am I taking the square root of a negative number? Because that's going to tell me what happens when I take that square root. So this is really the formula, or like the expression, I guess, for finding that discriminant. So let's go through the bigger version, because I've definitely had some questions from kids about how to go in order to solve that if you're going to do it on paper. And then let's also go up into Desmos and just remind you what that would look like with this problem. So I have b and a and c, so I'm just going to fill those in. So negative b is going to be negative 7, right? So this first negative sign is part of the formula, and the second negative sign is part of b. So that's why there's 2. Plus or minus the square root of negative 7 squared minus 4 times 2, which is a, times c, which is negative 7. And that's all over 2 times a, which is 2. All right, so if I was going to go through and tell you the order to go in for this, I handle four things in the first like step. The first thing I do is I handle what happens with these, maybe 2 negative signs or 1, just I simplify that part. Then I come through and I simplify the squared number, and I come through and multiply these 3 numbers together. This is the part that you're most likely to make mistakes on. And then the last part is to go through and multiply the 2 times 2 at the bottom. So there's 4 pieces that I kind of view it as to help me keep track of all my steps. So let's go through then and change color. Let's go to green. All right, so -7 is a +7. Oh, that's a highlighter still. I don't want that. Erase the highlighter. Go back to pen. And choose green. All right, so again, -7, so the negatives cancel out, make a +7. Got that plus or minus symbol. Square root. And so underneath the square root, if I just look at the squared part, I have -7 squared, which is 49. And then this is the piece. I made lots of mistakes on signs when I was doing it by hand as a teenager. I got to the point where I realized that I needed to basically count how many negative signs I have. So if I have these 3 numbers, it's a -4, right? Because this negative sign stays with it. So -4, +2, and -7. So 2 negatives here are going to cancel to make a positive. So really I have 4 times 2 times 7, and then all the negative signs are going to cancel out. So I know that this is going to be a plus here in the middle. And then 4 times 7, well, 4 times 2 is 8, so 56. It's probably the easier route. And then that's all over 2 times 2, which is that 4. All right, so now I have that pretty simplified. So now I think it's pretty clear that you need to add what's underneath this radical symbol. So 7 plus or minus the square root of, so that's 1,505. So this is not a perfect square. So I'm definitely going to get a decimal with this answer because I don't have a perfect square here. Let's go though, and now let's handle this idea of the discriminant. If I come to what I figured out underneath, oh, funny, I chose subtitles. That's funny. Oh, stop subtitles. If I go and choose what I had underneath that radical, that's going to be where I am able to put in that number as my discriminant. So let's go back to red and let's circle this. So this number is what I got when I did b squared minus 4ac, right? Because I did -7 squared minus 4 times 2 times -7. So that's the same thing that happened here. And so when I did all that, it equals 105. So since this is positive, that leads me to conclude that there's 2 solutions. It doesn't tell me what the solutions are. Doesn't even really, I mean, it's a step on trying to figure them out, but just knowing it's 105 doesn't help me figure out the solutions. I'd have to actually go through the whole process. Okay, so now that we're dealing with something that's definitely not a perfect square, let's go into Desmos and put in our formulas. I'm gonna unzoom all this, reset. Okay, so I want to put in the whole formula. So -b, I'm going to put plus first, the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. All right, so now I'm going to select all this and copy and paste it here, change the plus to a minus. So this represents my 2 x's. So in terms of what we were solving for, this would be this part down here, this 7 plus or minus the square root of 105 divided by 4. That's what I've typed in. I'm also going to type in just the discriminant to show you that you could do it with just that too. So that would be b squared minus 4ac. And since I used the same variables for all these, it's going to let me like input the same numbers and see what each one ends up being. So if I put in a, b, and c, let's type those in based on what we had here, right? So I had a as being 2, A was 2. B was -7. And C was also -7, right? So that was based on these numbers, right, that we did here. A was 2, -7, and -7. All right, so then if I look back at what I have, it tells me that the plus version of the answer is 4.3. The minus version of the answer is -0.8. And then the discriminant by itself, which we just figured out, but just to confirm it is 105. I also wanted to take a second just to type in the actual equation so you can see what it looks like as a graph. So 2x squared. So notice I'm using x because that's how the Desmos is going to graph it. Minus 7x minus 7. So it looks like this. So if I look at it, it's pretty clear when the discriminant says it's 105, a positive number, that it does cross the x-axis twice. So it makes sense that I do have these two solutions. And then when I look at where they cross, it is what it lists over here on the side, right? So that -0.812, that's what I round to if I get the nearest thousandth. And then if I round to the nearest thousandth on the other one, I get 4.312. So really, if I'm thinking about rounding to the nearest hundredth, right, because IXL wants you to do the nearest hundredth for this, then I would be doing 4.31 and -0.81. 4.31, -0.81. Double check. Submit. Perfect. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Hopefully you can kind of see now how these two ideas are connected. So one of them gives you a complete solution all the way down for the input variable X most of the time, but in this example it was Q. And then it also helps you determine how many solutions there are, although that really is the only thing it tells you is how many. It doesn't really give you any information about what the solutions are, just how many there are. Okay, hopefully that helps. Let me know if you still have questions. The next couple of weeks, there's definitely be some built-in time, to get some help if you need it. So let me know. Call me into your breakout room. Okay, good luck.